Okay, so let's move on to actually implementing uh, our handler. So we need to actually create the handler, and we also need to make sure that we are able to test that handler. So let's get started. So I will create a new file, and we'll place that in the API directory, and this will be users that go. Okay. All right, so that should be here. So we have our file, users that go. Well, not there. Looking at the wrong file, wrong directory. Yeah, here, users that go. Okay, the one in the API directory. All right, so yes, I know it's empty. So let's put something in it. So let's start off. Say our file name. CMD API users.go. Okay. And so let's create our package. We know our package is main, right? And so we need to do a few imports. We will need to import errors, of course. We will need to import net HTTP. And of course, we need our validator and our data. So Apple tree. Okay. Internal. And data. Okay. So I'm just gonna copy this and I will paste that and I will say validator. Okay, so these are what we need. So let's actually create our register user handler. So again, nothing new here. We're going to create our function. It's a method. It's a method on application, and it will be called register user handler. Okay, and of course, it's a handler, so we need a response writer. And of course, we need a request. Right, so, all right, we've got that. Let's proceed to implement. And so the first thing we need to do, like we did with our school handler, we need to be able to hold the data temporarily from our request body. So let's create so let's say hold data from the request of body, right? And so we'll simply create an input struct, so input, and we will have name type string. We will have email also of type string, and we will have password, okay, also of type string. Now we need to use our types, so let's say JSON, and we will call this one so name. So and then for this one the tag will be email, and for this one, of course, the tag will be password. Okay, Great, so we have that in place, and so we will proceed to actually parse the request body into this struct, right? In this case, an anonymous struct, because we have not really given it a name. Okay, so let's parse the request body into the anonymous struct, which is called input. So that's easy enough. We will simply say app.readJSON, okay? And we'll pass in W, of course. We'll pass in R, and we'll pass in the address of our anonymous struct. Okay, so let's check for any errors. So if error not nil, then we have to deal with that, and so we'll simply return a bad request. Okay, and so bad request response, we're going to pass in W, we're going to pass in R, and of course the actual error message, and we will need to exit the method. Okay, so return. Okay, so assuming that there are no errors, we will get past this, and we will proceed to copy the data to a new struct. Okay, similar to what we did. And we're going to call this struct users. Okay, and we're going to say it's a new data that users struct. Okay, and so we'll provide name, and the name will be input that name. Okay, and I will not explain why we do this, whereby we create a anonymous struct, and then we parse the data into it, and then once everything goes okay, we move that data into a new struct. I explained that in the previous video, so I will assume that you know why we're doing it this way. We have email. Email will be input, that email, and the password we leave out. So we're going to have activated, and that will be false. Okay, good. So we have these three things that we will save in users: name, email, and activated. Okay, so let's deal with our password. So let's generate a password hash. All right, and so we'll simply say user that password that set, and we'll simply pass in input that password. All right, good. Users. Okay, so notice we're only using the password when we want to create the hash. So there's no need to actually take this password, which is the plain text password, and store it into our model, because we will not be writing the plain text password to our database. We will be writing the hash of that plain text password to our database. So there's no need to store it in the user's struct. Okay, so once we've done that, then we need to actually check for errors. And so if we have an error, then we know something went wrong with the server. It's on our side. So server error response. Okay. So again, nothing new here. we'll simply return, and that takes care of that. Okay, so once we've done that, we will need to actually perform validation on the user input. All right, so there was a response. Now let's verify that what was provided in that response is actually valid data that we want and that we will trust that to store in our database. So again, we just follow a command pattern where we'll create a new validator. So validator dot new, and then of course I will simply call the validate users function. Okay, so validate user method, that is, not function, and it expects the validator v, and it expects the user model, which we know is users. Okay, so did I call mine user? Okay, so users. Okay. So probably call this user. That would make more sense. Let's call this user. Okay. Okay, so I will call the validate user method, and then I will check to see if there was any error. Okay, and so I will say not v.valid. Okay, if that's the case, then I know that something went wrong. Okay, so I'll simply say up.failed validation response WR, and I will have to specify what those errors were. Then of course I will return. All right, so every time that okay, user, every time that we have an error, we will have to return so that we don't continue executing the code in the rest of the handler. The rest of the code in the handler. Let me correct myself. Okay, so assuming that the validation went well, we will get to this point, and so now we will simply insert the data into the table or into the database. Okay, so again, we'll simply say up that models that user, okay, users that insert. Okay, so we have insert, and we'll pass in user, and we will have to get again check for any errors. So if error not nil, then we know something went wrong, and so we will have to see if it's a error whereby there were duplicate email or some other error. So whenever we have to check for multiple errors, we have to do a switch, of course, and then we will have to specify or ask or check to why do I keep typing that? Okay, so let's check the case and errors that is, and we'll pass in the error, of course, and we'll check to see if it's data.error duplicate email. If it is that type of error, then we know we have to notify the user. And so to do that, I will simply add that error. Okay, so email. Okay, I know what it is, so I'm going to add it. And then I will say a user with this email address already exists. All right. And then of course, I know that I will have to write an error message. So I will say failed validation response, because you failed to provide a valid email address. All right. Now, if that's not the problem, and there's some other problem, we'll put those other problems under default. And so we'll say app.server error response. We'll pass in W, we'll pass in R, and we'll pass in error. And then of course, after we exit the switch, we'll just do one return. Okay, we don't want to have to put a return here and maybe a return here, just one return. So after we exit the switch, then we exit. Okay, and that takes care of if there was an insertion error. Okay, so that's all we need to do in this case. We have inserted the data, and so once we have inserted the data and there are no errors, then of course we can notify the user and tell them that their data was written successfully. And so we'll simply write a 201 resource created. So we created status. Okay, so easy enough. We have a JSON method to do that. So app.write JSON, and so all we have to do is provide W and the status, which in our case will be 201. So status created. All right, so that's 201. All right, and after we've done that, we'll be able to actually provide the response. Okay, so we're gonna say user, and of course user. All right, and we don't need to write anything else. Right, so no headers. We're gonna put nil. Of course, what is it telling me here? Oh, okay, yeah. Right. And let's finally check. So if error not nil, then we'll simply provide a server error. Okay, and of course W, R, and error, and that's it. Since that's the end of our handler, then we don't need to have any return, because that would not make any sense. So that takes care of our register user handler. Again, you should see the pattern. We need to set up an anonymous struct to read in the request. If we are able to parse the request, then we then take that request and place it into a user struct, not using the plaintext password because we don't need it. And then we will go ahead and create a hash, and then we will perform validation on the name, the email. Okay, and once the name and email is valid, because we have already done our check with password, we will go ahead and actually insert our data. Right? And so once we have inserted our data, we will then go ahead and write a JSON response to the client, notifying them that we have saved their request. And that takes care of our handler. The next thing we'll do in the next video is to actually go ahead and update our route and then we will go ahead and test our handler to make sure it actually works. I'll see you in that video.